going on, everybody? If you have not been to an episode of Pantheon PlusYou before, the screen you see in front of you is really just an infograph. It's a little prep, give people a chance to get in, say hello, do their greetings. But if you haven't seen Pantheon PlusYou before, we try to pride ourselves on being a show that's really all about community. That's what Pantheon Plus is all about. And in this show, you're able to actually join live on the air and talk with the hosts or co-hosts that are on the show at any point. And so there's some instructions on the screen with how you can do that. You can type !Discord in the Twitch chat. That'll give you a link. You can join our server. You can just chat in there. If you're just an MMORPG fan, specifically if you're a Pantheon fan, that's a lot of our, well, 90%, maybe 95% of our conversation. That's why we're here. And tonight we also have a very special episode. So we'll get into that once we launch the show, so anybody who shows up on time doesn't miss anything. But again, on the screen right now, you'll see the instructions on how to do it. So also give a shout out to some of our moderators out there. We have quite a few moderators on tonight that'll be able to help you. Theric, starting with a T. Theric is taking questions from the chat. So if you're somebody who doesn't want to get in the voice channel, completely cool. No problem with that at all. But if you want to ping him with a question, just at Theric, he'll be collecting some chat questions. And if we have the opportunity to, we will get to those tonight as well. So about 2 minutes, if you're watching this on demand, you can go ahead and skip ahead about 2 minutes, and that's when we'll be starting up. And if you're watching it on demand as I say this, you've watched too much Spaceballs. Because the show is out before it's even finished. There's like 10 people that got that. There are people like Spaceballs with Spaceballs. What's up, Basgrim? Booch, see you out there. Thorn Deep, how are you? Like I said, at Theric75, throw him any questions you have that you want to ask in the chat. We'll try to do what we can to get to some of those chat questions. We are going to prioritize our green room on Discord, and we are going to make sure that people who are often on with us quite a bit, we are going to prioritize them. That doesn't mean content creators. That means community members. But we're going to do what we can to get to as many people as possible. You guys know who've seen the show before. That's our goal. It's all about you guys in the community. So we have 1 minute left, and then we will pop up the viewer warning. We will pop up the splash intro, and we're going to get going here pretty quick. Omega, you got it. LOL instant cassette. Yeah, it's out before the movie's even finished. I love it. At least one person got the joke. What's up, Battle Axe Theater? I see you guys there. You guys were in pretty early. Welcome. Thank you guys for coming tonight. And I have 9 o'clock. So let's get this show going. We're going to launch it up now. Here we go.
Oh, we're live? We're streaming right now? Cool. Awesome, man. Let me just,
What is going on, everybody? In typical form, this is Minus from Pantheon Plus, because that's what I've said since day one. And somebody said to me, you know, I want to stream, but I don't even know how to start. And a long time ago, I said to myself, well, I'm just going to say who I am. And a year and a half later, I say the same thing on every single video or every single live show I've ever done. I was going to make a shirt that said, hi, everybody, Minus here from Pantheon Plus, and just wear it. We have a very special episode tonight of Pantheon PlusYou. Super excited to announce that creative director for Visionary Realms, Joppa Perkins, is with us tonight. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here.
So awesome to have you. I'm not going to spend too much time gushing and thanking because we got a lot of stuff to do tonight. So we're going to get into a lot of topics here tonight. We're going to cover some questions from myself. If you haven't seen this show before, once again, this is a community-driven show. So we're going to ask you guys to go ahead and ping questions to @Theric75. He's our moderator taking some questions for you guys tonight. And there are some pings that we're going to be seeing from Omega to show you how to get into our Discord. And also how to pledge to Pantheon. That's important to us as well. Pantheon Plus is all about the success of Pantheon because that's what we want to play. And it would be really weird if there wasn't a Pantheon and our name was Pantheon Plus. So I think it serves us well to hope this game does extraordinarily well and put everything we can behind it. So it's all about getting pledges in there, getting people interested. So tonight we hope to help with that, but more than anything, we hope to really learn about the game. Joppa, I do want to thank you. I didn't even ask you before. Are you like me that now I'm just minus IRL? Are you Joppa to everybody, or do people call you Chris?
It's as many people as I kind of do life with outside of this project that know that I do this and have any kind of idea what gaming is. They like to say it with a smile, and it's been pretty fun. But Chris, Joppa both feel pretty interchangeable to me at this point.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll probably end up calling you Joppa quite a bit. That's how I grew to know you. So I think a lot of the community knows you that way. So the format here, I want to thank you. Joppa has watched our show, and I can't thank him enough for that. But he said to me earlier, right before we started, hey, I know you guys usually do a half hour extra for community. I'm down for that if you are. And of course I said yes. So the good news is if you read anything about how this show would work on Reddit, we're going to have an extra half hour for the community, which is awesome, which will also give me and Joppa some time to dig into some of the questions that we're asking and kind of, organically talk through some of this stuff, which I think is a lot better job, so we don't have to be rushing to try to get the community in. So I thank you for that. So let's go ahead and start. We have the way I'm going to break my questions down so you guys that are following can kind of understand what I'm trying to do here. We're going to do a quick introduction. We're going to talk about MMORPGs in general. I think that's important. If you watch Pantheon PlusYou, we're really about ideology of the genre, our experiences that we've had in the past with other games, and what we want and what we've been bred into liking. And I think that that's really important. And it's going to be interesting to hopefully get some of those comments out of Joppa and learn a little bit more about Joppa. And then we're going to jump into Pantheon. We're going to start talking about Pantheon and Joppa, as the community has dubbed information as beans. That just happened. And now that's what people are asking for. Don't hate me too much because I'm going to try to get some beans tonight. Little bit of beans. People are hungry.
Sure, man.
All right. So, Joppa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Not just like how you got into VR, which I'm actually interested to hear about, but also like what kind of gamer are you? What are some of your favorite games, even if they aren't MMORPGs? So if we could start there.
Sure, man. Yeah. So I've got to raise a glass here to a game, and really a series in particular that has probably, other than EverQuest, been the most impactful, and that is, of course, the Legend of Zelda series. I don't think there has been another game, and I mean, I'm talking like, I'm the very, very first Zelda game on the original NES, golden cartridge, the whole deal. Still have like my game little, inserts, and really all the way through. And it's more than just loving that game. It's also there's a lot of elements of that game, what made it great, that I think have a place in MMOs. And, I've talked about that before too, just not just Zelda games like Metroid, some of those earlier console games. I think there's a lot of room for some really cool stuff in MMOs. So that would be, but EverQuest as an MMORPG, that was the very first one that I ever played. And I have recently played it even still, on P99. And so it's just still both of those games have marked me deeply, for sure. And more than anything else.
EverQuest is interesting because for me, also being my first, the memories just flood back. Even if you only play it for like an hour, or you play it for a few days when you go back, or you play it for a month, there's just so many memories and things you want to go see that you probably don't even have to. Like, I make a trip out to see the Hermit because I just remember farming him in that building through the wall for months. It seemed like back then.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Legend of Zelda. I like that. I like that a lot. And it's interesting that you brought up the old games because you didn't have as many resources to work with, and yet these games have lasted this long. I mean, what do you think? What was it about Zelda for you?
You know, I've thought about that a lot. I think I do think some of it is time and place, and I think that always factors in to games. The games that we play and when they hit us, stage of life, um, all kinds of things like that. But there's just a lot of really sticky elements in Zelda, all predicated on this sense of exploration and discovery, and slowly kind of seeing more and more of the game open itself up to you. Um, you know, we think of those iconic items like bombs. You know, just
Yeah.
simply the bombs, and how. And yet, what's so amazing about those simple little bombs is that you get them early, and you use them to blow open holes in the wall, and that's cool. Um, but then before you know it, later in the game, especially in some of the later Zeldas, you're picking them up and throwing them into bosses' mouths. And so you take these very simple little game elements that start simple, you know, kind of warm themselves to you very simply, and then later on you're doing these really complex things with them. And so, you know, I think you can see even in something like a climbing system, you know, uh, if we do that right, then you should kind of experience some of that same thing. Like I can interact with it a little bit, you know, when I first get started, my skill's low. Um, I can grab onto a few ledges. I can, you know, climb this big chunky rock surface. But then later on, you see this guy, you know, on an ice, you know, ice covered wall that like angles back over his head, and he's, you know, got this like really cool pick that he's digging in, and he's doing all this stuff. And you're like, what? Like, how in the world do I
Yeah, you're
get to the
just
point
learning
where
how
I
to
can access that?
climb,
And
and you're seeing this guy do it.
yeah,
And that's interesting too,
very
because when
simple
you,
all the way to like,
yeah, when you see people doing, like when you're at a low level of anything, and you see somebody who's at a high level doing what you're doing, and you see the difference, that's exciting for sure.
it's huge.
So
It's huge.
one of the things, and I get this a lot, you'd be surprised. I talk to a lot of different content creators and different people that have come to us and we chat with them. I've talked to a lot of people in audio, and I know that's one of your huge passions. It's something you did for a while. Was audio. You did some composing and doing different audio for games. What got you into that? And this is a little ask from some of the community. They also want to know what software you like, so they can jump in and check that out too.
Sure. So just to be transparent, I was a high school teacher for a long time, and there is just kind of a point you realize once you start having kids that there's not a whole lot there's not a whole lot of places for me to go from here. And so I started to kind of consider like what else could I do? What other things could I, you know, try my hand at? And music has always been something that I've done. I used to be a singer songwriter, musician, recorded some CDs, did that kind of thing. And so, but I've also always loved orchestral music, and I just decided to teach myself how to do it. Like take the music knowledge. Met a lot of cool people that showed me the ropes, um, and that's kind of I took a chance. And thanks to my wife for letting me take such a chance, to just leave teaching and try to make something happen with music. And I read a blog on how to get started in digital composition, and it said look for a video game studio that is early enough in development that they haven't, you know, gotten all their people for that yet, but isn't so early that they're not ready to think about any of that stuff, and just scatter your music around and see who takes you. And at that point, I hadn't played an MMO in a couple of years. Again, just having kids and, you know, kind of starting family, and but I played EverQuest like crazy. Played Vanguard, you know, alpha beta tested Vanguard, and had just followed, you know, Brad for a long time. Followed him into Sigil, and kind of after Vanguard kind of, you know, didn't really do so hot. Ended up staying in WoW for a long time, but still would check in every once in a while, you know, to see, because I missed EQ. And but it was kind of on a whim after I read that blog. I think it was literally like a week after I read it, I just kind of randomly searched Brad's name again to see what was going on, and that's the first time I saw anything about Pantheon. It was back after the original team had left. It was kind of in that pocket where the original team had left. It was all basically volunteers at that point. And I was like, what are the chances, like
That
I
is
could
crazy. That's
send in a
crazy.
piece of music? And it happened. So, and then, I mean, there's a lot of other things that happened after that.
I'd say.
But yeah.
So what kind of software? I know that was just, I don't know, I use Audition for tiny bit stuff. So what kind of software did you use for some of your composing when you started?
Pro Tools, which most people would not recommend for digital composition, but I did a lot of live session recording as well. So I used Pro Tools, had a pretty nice library of virtual instruments, and then did some live recording of instruments as well in some places.
So what's your favorite instrument to play live?
My favorite instrument is guitar.
Okay.
Just personally. But I love strings. I love working with strings. I love brass too.
Anything.
Love them all.
I pretended to play guitar when I was in a band, but I always wanted to be singing and jumping in the crowd, and having guitar really limited that. So there was maybe one or two songs where maybe I had one little part I'd play. And I always told myself I was going to learn, but I had no capability to play and sing at the same time. Like that is some kind of wizardry from people.
Took me a long time. Took me a long time to get that down. That's very difficult to do.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. I'm just happy to walk and talk at the same time. So let's jump into MMORPGs. So I want to name some games. I think this is cool. You've probably experienced them or at least know of them. I want to name some games in the genre, and I'm curious if you can just tell me the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the game, or even if it's something that you kind of took away from it. Even just short, nothing crazy, but maybe we'll dig into it if it's something you want to talk about. So let's start. World of Warcraft.
Awesome.
I agree. The community's split on that. Do you see some of those debates that happen in some of the social media about World of Warcraft fans versus EQ fans?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I am
Absolutely.
a big,
and I yeah, go ahead.
No, go.
I love WoW. There are things I really don't like about it. There are ways I could see the game could have taken a direction in Classic that rode a little bit closer to the EverQuest line. Then it could have been a very different game and an amazing game. But I think the path they took also ended in being an amazing game. I just think it's a different kind of game, and it's a very accessible game, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's because of the intense degree of accessibility, especially where they've kind of ended up now, that I think is part of what's made a little bit of a perfect storm opening for us, because it's been so long. So
I've been a big proponent in the community when some of that anti-WoW comes up, and people will see me get fiery about this. It's even a joke in some of the discords where people are like, oh no, here comes Minus because we're making fun of WoW. But it's not so much defending WoW, it's defending there's a lot of people that don't realize the age gap in our player base that want to play this game. We have teens and young kids playing games that want to try Pantheon, and we have MMO veterans who were playing Ultima, who were playing EverQuest. And I can't blame somebody for the year they were born, right? Like if you weren't born when EQ launched and it was big, you're not going to play EQ typically. You're going to play WoW, and that's what you know. And I don't ever want to write off that big of a community that could experience Pantheon, that could come in and we could show them something different in a way, and bring them into our community. I think is extraordinarily important because, as much as we all want to play this game, we can't play it if we don't have players to play with. And I think that we should probably all be excited to take anybody, right? So,
yeah, but I think at the same time, it's important to say that, like, that being said, and I agree with you completely, there's also that line too of it doesn't mean there aren't certain things that we're not going to compromise on that I think really are necessary in forging that unique path that WoW didn't take. And that's, I mean, I tend to think of Pantheon, if we execute things the way we're hoping to, I would love to see the end result be a game that feels very much like a taking the best aspects of EverQuest and classic World of Warcraft, and then Pantheon's own kind of mixture. And I think that experience would be amazing. But there are really key key things that we would need to stay away from and
Mhm.
plan to stay away from in order to achieve that.
Awesome. So the next one's easy then. EverQuest.
The greatest. That's
Yeah.
the first thing that comes to my mind. The greatest. You don't understand. Like EverQuest, I started playing EverQuest. It was a magical, perfect time. It was the summer before my 9th grade year in high school. Or maybe it was the summer before my 10th grade year. I think it was actually the summer before my 10th grade year. So, I mean, it was the last summer that I was young enough, for my parents at least, that I didn't have to work. Both my parents worked, and so I was home every day all summer by myself playing EverQuest, and it was like literally 18-hour days
Yeah.
sometimes playing that game.
I didn't realize we were about the same age, because that was about the same time. My first, you know how you had girlfriends,
The
but then you
gray
had
throws people off.
yeah, you had like the first real girlfriend. Like you had girlfriends, but it wasn't like a real girlfriend. My first real girlfriend bought me EverQuest. I didn't know about it, and I had it was ready for launch day. Well, she had bought one that was returned. We didn't realize the seal was open, and they stole the code out.
Oh wow.
So I'm sitting here trying to log in. Your code's already been redeemed, and I'm literally running around the world trying to find another copy of this game. And you remember when it launched, there wasn't getting it. You weren't getting another copy. There were shortages. So it took me 2 days after launch to actually get a copy. But yeah, it is. You're right. That time period. I'm actually happy you brought that up, because we're gonna dig into that a little bit about the time period, what it meant, and the time we put into it. You joke, but I would play that game so much I would forget to eat. And then we would go to Denny's at like 12 at night because we didn't eat, none of us. And that'd be the only time we actually physically saw each other. And the whole time we'd talk about EverQuest, and then we'd go back and log in.
Yeah.
So
It was the same with us. Ours was Mr. Gaddy's. I don't know if you know what Mr. Gaddy's is,
No,
but it was a pizza buffet restaurant.
all night
Super
open.
healthy. Great place to go. Yeah, let's talk about EverQuest.
That's awesome.
Good times.
Final Fantasy 14.
I actually have never played Final Fantasy 14, but through working on this project and all the community interaction, I feel like I have a good sense of it. I think it exists in a really interesting spot where it has kind of, it's certainly more of a challenging group-oriented game than kind of the other offerings, and even a lot of the ones that existed around when it came out. It's a long-standing game. I mean, it's still trucking. So I've got a lot of respect for that game. And I know a lot of people in our community love it and respect it. And I've been helped even design-wise, like hearing arguments from the perspective of Final Fantasy 14. So I don't know much about it, having not played it, but it's been great. It's been helpful.
It's an interesting game too, because I think the one thing about that game that blows my mind is that game relaunched. It came out and it was really poor received. The community did not like it. There were just everything, and they actually took the game down and relaunched it as what it is today in a year, which is probably one of the more unique MMO things that I've ever heard. That they were able to literally, we're done. This game's not what we want it to be. We're going to take a year and we're going to change the whole game. So that's a pretty interesting thing.
That's very bold.
Yeah. Arcade. I know you guys have said and talked about that a little bit in streams.
Arcade, I trying to pick a good word here. Not very impactful for me. One of those games that it
I don't want to put you in a spot where you have to badmouth them. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I get what you're saying.
I know that. Yeah. I would just leave it at that. It just didn't have a high impact on me. And if it had an impact, it's more to solidify the fact that there really is a need for a new kind of breed of MMO.
And it's interesting because we're starting to see games trend towards those games. For I think the wrong reasons. I won't jump into a ton of that, but it's interesting. You're seeing more of an arcade type of game than you're seeing more of even a WoW type of game. If I'm going to be honest, I think the two of them are massively different. A couple more before we jump to the next question here. Vanguard.
Devastating, man. I was so excited for that game, and it's so funny. And I'm sure we're gonna get into this some later, so I don't want to speak about it too much now. But uh, I was very, very vocal in alpha and beta testing that game. Very, very vocal about my displeasure, my frustration, my I just want to grab someone and shake them. Why aren't you doing this? Why can't you see this? And it's funny because some of the chatter going on right now around Pantheon, it sounds similar, and there are things from the outside looking in where I could have totally seen myself in the same position, saying the same things and being frustrated about the same stuff. And it's been really interesting to just kind of process that a little bit. But Vanguard had a lot of promise in the sense of what it was trying to achieve, but it just poorly executed on so many fronts that it didn't have it didn't have legs. I mean, it just couldn't get itself up off the ground and bear the weight of how epic it was trying to be. So I would say devastated. I mean, I look forward to that game so much, and followed it for so long, and
Yeah, it's tough. Well, I mean,
that's too bad.
it's interesting how much you're able to relate that, though. And I think that, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I think one of the reasons that you guys are making this game as you are is to avoid what happened to Vanguard. I mean, I get that testers are maybe having some of the same concerns, but I think that the message and the drive to make the game, and the reason I jumped into this was because it was admitted right from day one that we learned a lot from Vanguard, that we learned, and why this game is crowdfunded is strictly probably because of what happened with Vanguard. Is that a pretty accurate assessment?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's there's a lot to learn, and it is something that we bring up from time to time and kind of keep in front of us, because we don't want to make the same mistakes, and unless you're actively working to avoid those mistakes, it's very easy to fall into them. So it definitely serves us in that way, for sure.
Okay. Let's jump into Pantheon. So the first thing you brought up, how much we both had played EQ and the connection to the game. And the word connections evolved a lot since then. Since 1999, being connected to a game versus being connected today, that terminology, just as life has changed, as technology has changed, the fact that we have a computer in our phone that's probably more powerful than what we were running EverQuest on back then. So this is a little long-winded. I'm going to do this the best I can. But I've been thinking a lot about being connected to EverQuest. And in this day and age, I don't think that a majority of people are going to be connected the way they were to EverQuest's world, because being connected to EverQuest's world was getting home and sitting in front of the computer. And the way you were connected and the amount you were connected allowed you to understand the community. It allowed you to know the people who talked all the time in East Commons channel. It allowed you to know who was who because you were on a lot, you experienced it. Now, in the modern era, we're so connected to our phones, and don't worry, nobody in chat panic here. This isn't a Diablo moment that I'm asking you. But have you ever thought about how mobile cannot impact playing the game, but impact staying connected to the community, whether it's talking to your guild, being able to talk in a voice channel, being able to craft, doing bank organization? I know that that's something difficult for a studio that's smaller to kind of go crazy with, but have you ever thought about how to bridge that gap and that connection that we probably won't get back with modern technology?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about that on several occasions. The concept of some kind of a companion type app, or something that would allow you to do non-gameplay related type activities, to just to be in the game. We're pretty serious about our core time, like playtime goal. That 2 to 3 hour core playtime goal is something that we're working really hard to achieve and actually do. It's something that's easy to say, but we actually are working hard to kind of think of our content and our gameplay and our content in light of that. But part of helping to, like, I think connection's an interesting way to think about it, and it's a good way to think about it. being able to access the game world, being able to communicate with, the people in your guild, being able to, even just look at your inventory. There's something really cool about being able to just, pull up your inventory remotely and, just kind of think about that upgrade path that you're going for, or reminisce about, how you achieved that item, and or looking at your stats and kind of theory crafting a little bit on how you could get a little more of this, a little more of that, and what it would do for you. And so I think that's something that would be really cool to see. The thing that we have to keep in mind, and this is going back to that, like, always keeping lessons from the past in front of you, is that we have to be very, very intentional about what we spend time on, and what we invest resources in. And so these are the kind of things that we've talked about. They've come up as very natural kind of, this would be nice to have moments in internal conversations, but it's something that would be a post-launch thing for sure. And we'll just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, I just think that's I think that's the gap that a lot of companies haven't been able to fulfill. And it doesn't have to be an app. And it's interesting that you're thinking about the 2 to 3 hours. So, for someone like me, you brought up like looking at your inventory. If you're like me at all, you've spent, you take one of your days of gameplay and you're like, okay, today I'm going to organize my bank. Today's the day. And that takes almost a whole play session, right? So like, is there ways to make that easier, so to speak? So, let's jump into the tenets for a little bit here. The core tenets, which, I'm sure if you guys don't know about, check out PantheonMMO.com. That's what the game was built on, sort of day one, I guess. I mean, before anything was built, there were these tenets laid down. Am I right in saying that?
There were tenets laid down, so to speak, when I joined the team. And then there was, in early 2015, there were a lot of sessions that Brad and I did, actually, to sit down and kind of comb through those and kind of, reaffirm them. And then even kind of, I think there were a few more that even kind of were birthed that early in that year, as we kind of went through that. So, but yes, they've been long standing, they've been integral, and they've been set and reaffirmed. Very important. Very important.
So with those, having built them, and then you start building the game and you say, okay, we're holding to these things. I'm sure it poses some challenges sometimes. And then you have the community now. So when you built those, when you kind of came up with the theology of the game, the ideology, what you wanted to accomplish, you had these things, and then you started to build. Have there been any of the tenets that, more than others maybe, have pulled you back and said, we got to stick to this? Where sometimes you might be floating away just in thought process, just an idea, how to implement something. And then you really say, well, this is the one that we have to stand to.
Yeah. And the one that keeps coming to my mind in the most is the stance on instancing, and not doing instancing, committing to an open world, shared world, shared environment. And there's so many temptations to veer away from that. There's so many places where it's like, it would just be so much easier to just instance everything. And it's like, and of course you see why it's not a bad decision, in the sense of it solves a lot of problems. But, and even as close as we've come, I would say it just in like even allowing it on the table as something to be thought through and talked about, openly.
It like feels like dirty or something, like, oh no.
Yeah. Like even as close as we've gotten, like it always comes down to, there is just an effect that it has invariably on the community and the social aspects of the game that is just irreconcilable. There's an irreconcilable cost to that. And so that has been
way of
one
putting
of the
that,
places
actually.
where
That's a great term for that, because nobody wants to be alone in an MMORPG, and knowing that you're completely alone and you're not gonna have a memory based on community. You're gonna have a memory based on what you're fighting, and that's a different feeling.
It is, man. Um, it is, and so it's a challenge that we've had to embrace. It's one of those things where it's so easy to say, like so much with game design, like it's just I won't get off into the weeds here, but game design is one of those things that you know everybody thinks they can do, and everybody can do to a degree. But it's the thing that's hard about it is when you go from an idea, which is easy to have. Everybody can sit around and come up with ideas, or those ideas that have just kind of come up along the way while we've been playing a game. And I mean, that's how the perception system happened, was literally playing Guild Wars 2. And like, there's this freaking beautiful, like brass bronze constellation thing in, what's the name of the city? Divinity's Reach. Is that what it's called? There's in one section of it that is beautiful and striking. And I remember seeing it and being like, oh, that's so cool. And then realizing I didn't have a quest for it. And it was like, who cares? And I'm not even gonna, there's no reason to even stay around here and like try to figure this out. And so just that's an example of like an idea hitting and being like, wow, there's got to be a way to make this better. There's got to be a way to improve on this, because all I'm doing is looking at a mini map. All I'm doing is paying attention to what I have quests for. And if I don't have a quest for anything, if there's not a little blinking light, then I don't care. And
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
How do you do that better? And
that's a crazy thing you just said, because that actually, so just to practice streaming and keep the community going and build the community, you know, we play a lot of different MMOs. We're starting to on Twitch, you know, on our off nights from Pantheon Plus. And one of the games I picked up just because I had skipped it, it's not very popular, is BDO. And we just played it 2 nights in a row just to see this is what this game is. And it's interesting because when you start BDO, there's a thing you can select that tells you, do you want a marker to show you exactly where to run to? Do you want nothing? Do you want a little circle? And you get to pick. So, you know, someone who doesn't want to be handed everything like me, I would think that I would say, well, I want to pick the nothing. But then there's that part of my mind that says, but all the other people are going to pick the pathing and I'm going to be at a disadvantage. Right. So it's funny because you said, you know, you're so used to these marks over people's heads, these lights. We don't want them, but if they're there, we're going to use them, right? How do you avoid that?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be the aimless dude running around, you know, everyone else knows where to go. Yeah, and that's, I mean, we've just been having some conversations today. Yeah, actually yesterday and today on just kind of ratcheting some of the few final like decision points and just things very much related to that. I mean, design is very iterative, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Like you can have a design and you can have it just, I mean, unbelievably well fleshed out on paper. But it's until you partner with a programming team who can begin to implement it and then more than anything else, you can actually get in and experience it, that you realize like this is full of holes. This is not sustainable. This has all kinds of edge cases that we weren't able to account for. And we're either having to scrap this or go back to the drawing board. And there's usually several iterations of that as you go along. And I think that's something that's really important for people to understand in general, is that there's a difference between a vision, which I would liken more to tenets and more to like overarching, as you would say, like ideology about what you're doing and what you think is important, versus like mid and low level design tier, which is actually like, how do we actually create a game that's full of mechanics and systems and experiences that both uphold that ideology, but actually like issues out in a playable experience that's fun.
I was just going to say the word fun, because you guys have used that a lot, saying, you know, is it fun? Because if it's not fun, how much time are we going to put into developing something that's not fun? Just because we said we were going to, it doesn't make any sense. So using a couple tenets, and I know you know these, so I'm not saying these for your behalf here, but for people in the community who maybe aren't as familiar with them or just went over them, I'm gonna name a couple tenets here and jump into my next question because of it. And I'm gonna push you a little here. I'm gonna, you know, you say what you can say, but I'm gonna push it. We did have Nathan locked down Ben Dean. He gave him a different stream. There's a fake stream running right now where everyone thinks you're just saying the right thing. So don't worry, you're safe. We have Nathan in charge of it. I just hope we get Ben back. So a couple things. Classes having identities. Understanding that challenging game is truly rewarding. The greater risk, greater reward. Character progression being important. The depth of the faction and alignment system, and the fact that player levels should be meaningful. So that group is based a lot around our characters, our place in the world. So I'm curious for you. You've played a lot of MMOs. Your team's played a lot of MMOs. There are games where people really stick to a main because you get constant growth. And there are games like World of Warcraft, which I love, but it really enables flavor of the month. Like, this class is great. I'm going to switch completely. I'm going to start leveling this class up. I'll be raid ready. If you had your way, and I know this is tough to predict because gamers are going to be different, would you want to create a game where people are sticking to their main so that main can be something important that people want to relate and stay at that character? Or do you want to create a game where people can have a lot of alts that are impactful?
It's interesting to want to draw a line between those two things. And I don't know that I would want to. I
Okay.
think, and that may be coming from the way that I've interacted with my characters and the way that I tend to see the world, so to speak. I get really into all of my characters. They all are meaningful, and they all have their own kind of place in me and in the game world. And but I mean, I don't think it would be right to try and prioritize either one of those. I think you would want to try to create a game where both things could be achieved, because you're going to have different players. You're going to have both kinds, and so having a game that really supports a depth and a longevity. But see, the questions like that are funny because there's the philosophy side of it, but then there's the low level, again, that part of you that's always ticking of like, okay, well, you create something that's really, really good for longevity on a specific character. Then what do you do about new characters that are trying to like get started? And if there's this like, a 1,000,000-mile long path, then you're creating a very difficult situation. So we've actually talked about that a little bit. A really good conversation with Sacred actually recently about that, and he had some really good thoughts on it, about just constantly keeping that paradigm in mind. Paradigm's a word I say a lot, by the way, first and foremost. But it's a good question. But I would say fundamentally, I don't know that I would want to align between those two things and do things focusing on one to the detriment or the neglect of the other, but more trying to keep them both in mind as we work towards making both of those viable approaches. That'd be my answer.
No, it's an interesting question, and I mean, answer there, and it's tough, because I'm like you. I play. I have alts for days, especially as a raid leader, as a guild leader. I played the role we needed. Even in the end game of Legion, I switched to a warlock, and in 2 weeks, was raid ready and, pulling through fights that we were struggling in. But it's interesting because I've actually always been very envious of single player characters. I have a friend who played WoW for 10 years, never played anything but his hunter, never. And he played all the time, every day he was online, didn't even have an alt. And I was just like, wow, like that's really cool to be that connected to a character. And there's part of me that says if the game's really difficult, maybe I'll be more likely to do that. But there's always that player looking at other people doing cool things. So EverQuest, for example, I was a wizard. It was super cool until Velaeus, when everything resisted Ice Comet. And then played
yeah. Sorry, I haven't heard that one yet.
Oh, nice. What is it? What do you Velius? Velius? Is that it?
I've heard Velius and Velius, but I haven't heard Velaeus.
Yeah. So there you go. No, trust me. It's I'm the worst guy to take any words from. I'm still on the campaign that they're called Dark Mirror, even though you guys have said it's Dark Mirror. So I'm still on that campaign. So the interesting thing about that, like I was saying, is you see someone. I was starting to struggle in the class. I wasn't as powerful I used to be, and all of a sudden I see this Ixar monk come up with whoosh trance sticks moving 1,000,000 mph, hitting things, my screen's filling up with their hits. I'm like, that's amazing. And that day I stopped playing my wizard and I made an Ixar monk because I was like, I need to see that, I need to experience that. So it's really hard for, I'd imagine that the developer side of planning that out is a lot harder because you just don't know what moments players are gonna experience.
For sure. In
Now-
fact, the last time I played through on P99, which has been a while, but I forced myself to stick to only one character because I knew with the limited time that I have, like, I would never see max level if I did what I typically do, which is what you just described. Like every time I see something cool, I'm like, wow, I've got to have one of those. I've got to have one of those.
Yep.
So
Or you get
I'm
that
sure we'll
amazing
see
drop.
a lot of that.
Like I made a Shadow Knight because I got a Mace of Shadow Souls
Yeah.
back in the day. No desire to play one. I
There you
just
go.
know that weapon was good for that time period. So let's stick with classes and let's stick with our characters because that's if you ask me what I'd want to talk most about, that's probably it. If you could talk a little bit, what class from the moment that you guys implemented it at first or the ideology of a class to what it is today, what class has changed the most? I see the smile. You're thinking of a couple, or are you thinking of one in particular and how to say it?
I'm thinking of a couple, but I'm also aware of how I can overthink things sometimes. Rogue is one that stands out.
Okay.
Not that you would have any interest in that.
None.
Rogue definitely. And Wizard too. Wizard's gone through a lot of interesting evolutions. Those two definitely, and then Warrior. I think resilience was always a planned mechanic, but I think the introduction of resilience, and again going back to that actual, like, here it is on paper, but
Yeah.
now it's in game, and then that's caused us to do some interesting back and forth on the Warrior. But yeah, I would say if two rose to the surface, it would be those two, the Rogue and the Wizard.
Awesome. And is there a class right now that you think is probably going to be undergoing quite a bit of change moving forward, or that still has some change to go?
Yeah, for sure. And even with the ability modification layer, that's causing us to want to just to do another one of those iteration passes and make sure that, you know, the classes are still achieving what we want them to achieve and feeling how we want them to feel, sitting where we want them to sit. But yeah, I think I would think of, like, the Ranger would be one that is, you know, we're kind of inching ever closer to that sweet spot of that kind of concept of their skirmishing. Just absolutely insistent on us finding it because I just think it's going to be really cool.
Are you guys trying to revitalize the perception? Good word, right? The perception of the Ranger. Is that what we're doing here for the EQ fans? Because we all know what people think from the EQ era of Rangers, right?
Yeah, I definitely I want you to feel like you have just as sturdy of a DPS class as you would if you had a rogue or a monk in the group. I really would love for them to feel very, very legitimate, very, very high performing. The summoner too. The summoner is one that I should have mentioned because in really everything that's coming down to the Archimentals and how they're such a huge defining part of that class, both in the variety, the real depth of variety that you're going to get between them in terms of how they interact with enemies and different abilities that they have. But the fact that they're leveling up with you, you're able to kind of make decisions about how you not only, like, distribute their stats, but the ability to kind of open up their own worn inventory, having, you know, their own kind of gear that they wear, um, their own kind of weapons. Like, I mean, it's like having a bona fide second character that you're, you know, shepherding and growing and improving the power of it. And I think that's a class that has seen some pretty cool evolutions. And I think is
It's
gonna
an
end up in a
interesting
really
take
cool
on a
place.
pet class because you guys have talked openly about it before that you know the pet is really going to be the core of the summoner, doing a lot of the damage, being controlled, the way they cast their spells. The summoner's like a, if I'm not mistaken, the way I've interpreted the way you've explained it before, and it's been talked about, the summoner's like the utility of the pet. Does that make sense? Is that a good way to put it, or is that a little off?
No, I think it's a good way to put it. That we want the emphasis to be on the pet in terms of how they do their damage, and that's what the summoner is. It's a DPS, a magical DPS class, and so they do bring this amazing utility to the table with all of the summoning that they're able to do, and not just in terms of summoning items, but there's just some cool things they're going to be able to do. They're going to have a really interesting skill cap. You know, I think I talked when I did the interview with Baz at PAX about, you know, their mana shield passive, where they can, you know, kind of summon that very short duration shield that, you know, I've always kind of envisioned like Doctor Strange, you know, and that kind of
Oh, cool.
those little ethereal shields they can pull up, and they're very quick. But if you can time that right, then you can really save yourself some hurt. A few other things like that that are very like situational summoning type things that if you're able to time those things properly, they can really be effective. You know, another one being like the little pocket, the dimensional pocket that they can kind of summon and step into, and, you know, avoid taking the incoming damage or the debuffs, and then actually it strips them of their current debuffs and buffs when they come out of that. But they're going to have some really interesting ways to be kind of slippery, which is cool.
Sounds like there's going to be a nice
So a
skill
lot of
cap
utility.
though. Like it'll be something where you're
Yeah,
going to
and
have the player's skill is going to make a big difference. And I think that's important when you're talking about classes in general, is there needs to be that. There should be classes that are a little easier to play. I don't think that's a problem personally. And I think there should be classes that when you see somebody, you know the difference between a seasoned veteran with the way they play, the skills they use versus someone who maybe hasn't spent as much time. They can both be efficient, but there's just that different level to go to as a player.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I will feel like we failed if watching other people play and playing yourself feels like there's no skill happening. There's no, wow, I can't believe that person pulled that off. I know that sounds, I can already, I feel like there's probably already questions bubbling up in the green room about like, well, then why are you doing a limited hotbar?
Oh, you're going to get one. I mean, be ready for it. Be ready for it.
Yeah,
You know, I love limited
I'm
hot
ready.
bars, so you're not going to get it from me. I'm in. When I saw that bar down there and I was like, that's the new designed one. Let's move. I was ready. We're going to be getting to the community here in about 10 minutes. We'll spend a half hour with the community, Joppa. But you set yourself up for my dig. I'm going to push you a little, tiny bit here.
Sure.
You brought up the interview with Baz from PAX, and we're talking about classes. You brought up a statement there. It's a long time ago. Completely understand it. And we were talking about Bard. Now, I'm not looking for dates. I'm not looking for promises. But one of the things you kind of were confident in at the time was you felt like Bard was going to probably make it for the sole fact of the balance of class archetypes, introducing the support class. So you don't need to give me a date or anything, but are you as confident, a little less confident, just because I know a lot of the development shifted. I mean, let's be honest, Fairthale was a big shift, at least from our perspective. Or do you think that it's probably going to be a post-launch class if you're willing to say that is?
What is a Bard again?
Booch, where are you?
I am every bit as confident now as I was then.
Awesome. That's huge. I think you just made the community really happy right there. The two questions I had about Bard and Necro, no actuals. Am I right in saying that that bard's being built as a support class. You know, that's going to be a different support than an enchanter, but that the ideology, the theory, the on paper bard, that it's going to fill a different type of support role. Is that where you're aiming for bard?
Yep, definitely. Very support heavy. They would probably fit into the control archetype. In terms of the kind of crowd control capabilities they're going to have. And interestingly enough, the Necromancer will as well.
Excellent. That was my next question. So you jumped right into that. So,
yep.
Okay. So both support classes. Okay. So what, again, high level, Enchanter, Necro, Bard, what are the ideological differences in their way they're going to support that you can kind of envision?
Well, so I would put the Necro. So when I said the Necro as well, I was speaking more to the control, not necessarily the support.
Okay.
The Necro is going to be more of a, like the Dire Lord, kind of a selfish class, which I think is kind of what we would expect. Not to say that there's not going to be some support or utility oriented abilities, which they absolutely will have. But so you can kind of put the Necro in because it's a. There are still some DPS elements to that class as well, and I would say even more so than the Bard for sure in terms of like their ability to do damage, especially if we're talking about undead and other types of entities. I'd like to see it extend beyond undead, but trying to navigate here a little bit.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
It's great questions. The Bard definitely the Bard. I think one of the things we love about the Bard is the idea of this just very, it doesn't matter what group it is, it doesn't matter what class makeup, the Bard is just always good to have. They're able to benefit just about any type of class and any type of gameplay element in their, and I think that's ultimately where the Jack of all trades kind of idea came from, because they certainly didn't feel like a Jack of all trades in EQ in terms of like they can't heal very well. They can't, there's certain things they can't do very well, but what they could do very well is fit and adapt and kind of almost morph into this like perfectly fitting enhancer to, and I don't mean that to be a disparaging thing, because that was one of my favorite classes. And when I say enhancer or an amplifier, it gets pretty powerful when you're both able to enhance your group and debuff pretty heavily as well, and control. I mean, they're going to be a very,
it takes a different mindset for a player like that, but there's a group of players that want to do that. They want to just be that, and like you kind of said, the perfect words, enhancer. Like, I don't mind sitting back. I don't need to be the top of the DPS meters. I don't need to be the top of healing meters. I don't need to be running the group from the front, but you guys are going to know I'm here, and when I'm not, you're going to miss me. And you brought up a good point, with what they were in EverQuest. I loved Bard as well. To me, I just lambent armor. I mean, as soon as I saw that, I made a Bard. There was the Ixar story. That's my Bard story. I saw someone running around. Yeah. And the thing I remember most about being a Bard was Kara Island with the cats, which didn't matter at all. It was in the middle of nowhere. I think I slaughtered that poor. Yeah, I think I slaughtered that poor city for months, just running them in a circle with my Bard, doing the really low damage AoE, just killing hundreds of them just to get experience.
There you go.
So, but that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know that there's not a lot of info out there. Like you said, you kind of have to navigate it a little bit, but I think you just made a lot of people pretty happy. So, so interesting stuff there. The last question I have for you, and then we'll jump to the community here, guys. We'll have about a half hour. So we're going to go to the green room and I'll announce who's coming in. Recently Basgrim actually put a video out. It's a really cool video. It kind of gathered all the streams, screenshots, and different areas within the world and kind of put them together, because one of the things, and I'll openly admit this frustrates me in the community. I am allowed to have frustrations too, everybody in chat. Just the amount of people within the community that are saying, oh, they've been working on one zone. And I'm sure that makes you guys kind of even just like, oh, we're not working on one zone. The Fairtale's one zone. It's one place. It's you've said it's bigger. You've talked about the depth of just Fairthale. but people seem to think that you haven't done anything anywhere else in the world. I'm not looking again for percentages. I don't think any of that does anybody any good. But do you want to dispel some of that? You have the chance right now. Like, there's a lot more of the world built than we've probably seen, I'd imagine. I know you guys don't want to show us everything, and you've been sticking to the content you're making in Fairthale because that's where a lot of the systems are going to be. What's your comments to the community on that? The people that are worried that you've been making one zone, which again I don't agree with. But what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we certainly haven't been making just one zone. If just try to do a quick. I know it'd be helpful to do a count necessarily, but Fairthale itself is massive. Just that zone in and of itself. I mean, this is a 4K by 4K zone. And so it is a massive zone. But then when you think of Fairthale again, just by itself, you've got the Merc and Sleepless, which are also two other zones in and of themselves that we kind of tend to connect with Fairthale because they're a part of it. And when I say they're a part of it, like you would zone into Fairthale, and then you would zone into the Merc, and then you would, zone into not zone into. I don't mean to include Sleepless in that, but I'm just saying like that those three zones are kind of the three kind of zones in and around like the work that we're doing in Fairthale as a reference zone, and some of the things that we're able to reference out and work out and build out in the Merc, and some of the things we're able to reference and work out in the Sleepless zone. Those three have been kind of our main referential zones. One's a raid, one is more of a kind of a I'm trying to be careful about what I even say about the Merc here. So they all represent really, really significant things that we have needed to be able to reference out system-wise. But there's so much more beyond that we're working on as well. Project Fairthale, I'll put it like this, like Project Fairthale is just as much a what's the best way to describe it? What we want to achieve in Project Fairthale is a completion of Pantheon's gameplay loop. What does it mean to play Pantheon natively, to create a character, to level that character up, to experience true progression through the game, to have enough zones available contiguously that actually are connected together, not because you're clicking little teleportation portals, but because you're able to run on foot from one place to another, that have like legitimate level spreads, that have legitimate quest lines that take you to places intrazone and to other zones far away, where you're going to be able to experience climates in their natural locations and acclimation as a true system that's hooked up with all of its supporting UI elements and itemization elements. You're going to be able to experience your class starting out young and weak and growing into what it's supposed to be, and able to experience all the things along the way with that, from having to buy and earn and find your abilities, interacting with the ability modification system, the stat overhaul that we're doing with the new stat tool, and the itemization that's flowing with that, and what that will mean for that true kind of final set in progression of gear, doing gear the way we have always meant to do gear, which is not the way that we've shown it in demos and in streams, where everything's very set based, because we've been focused more on the visuals of the gear. Like here's creating a full set of leather, a full set of plate, but in reality, like we're going with an approach very much more the best handful of chest pieces that you can get in this band of level ranges is here in the world and here in the world, and otherwise you've got to kind of make do with kind of a mismatch, and it's going to be very difficult to find matching gear as far as like sets because we don't really want to go that route. And so I could say so much. I could go for probably 30 more minutes of just, and these are things that we've been working on for this past long stretch of time. This isn't like, now we got to get started on all this stuff. This is what it's all been about.
Yeah.
And so when pre-alpha 5, when Project Fairtail begins to kind of come out and be experienced, it's meant to be like stepping into a new era where what we've always wanted, which is this taking all of Pantheon's ideas, all of the systems, all the gameplay elements, all the mechanics, all the X factor, and the genuine progression of the game, and having it all kind of now there. Like it is now there. There's no stop gaps. Like we haven't gotten that in yet. So
yeah, you're testing this. That'll come later. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's huge. It's huge. Project Fairtail's huge.
That's awesome. And I hope that people that are a little worried about that watch Basgram's video. You just heard it from Joppa. There's a lot going on. I mean, when we saw Amber Fate, you had to think something was up, right? Like we saw that zone before. We saw it again. There's got to be a party that's like, wait a second. This zone looks a lot better than it did before. Something's up. So keep that in mind, guys. Awesome stuff. Joppa, thank you for clarifying that. I know there's a lot of landmines there. It's tricky to get into a lot of it, but thank you for that. So Joppa, are you ready? You want to talk to the community? You ready for this?
We're doing that? No, yeah. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Wait, I gotta go, guys. I gotta go. No. Okay, guys. So here's my big ask. We're not gonna do dates. I've said this before. I want you guys to come in and I want your question to be useful. We have a half hour. I want to get as many people in to be able to talk to Joppa. You don't get to do that anywhere else. It's cool. He's putting himself on the line. Let's not get into dates. Let's ask the questions you want to know. Let's ask about the classes you love. This is your show. So do what you want to do. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring people in, ask your question, greet, say hello, and then we're going to probably drop you out so we can get ready to go to the next one after it's over. We want to try to get as many questions in as we can. And Theric we'll get some questions from him. We'll bring him up. So Theric, I'll let you know when we're going to bring you up. We'll have you ask some of the questions that have come from the community. And then we'll try to maybe compile the other ones we don't get to from the community, and maybe we'll send them off or do something, which we'll try to get them out there and annoy the right people with their questions. So let's go ahead and start with Hoye. Hoye is a community member. He's been on the show a couple times. He's a big tank fan. So Hoye, we're bringing you in. I see that you're unmuted. You're ready to go. So I'm bringing you into the live channel now. Hoye, are you there? Oh, this is the only trick with doing a live.
I'm here. Yes.
Oh,
how are you?
Hello. Oh yeah, you're on live. I'm gonna be quiet. You don't want to talk to me. You've already done that. So.
What's up, Hoye?
Hey guys, how you guys doing?
Doing good, man.
Doing
What's
well,
your question for Joppa?
So let's hit the hard questions first, I guess. So like you said, I've got a question about the hot bars, and I'm not here to argue with you or say, oh, you need to change it. I'm not here to do that. I do have some questions about your thoughts on the process, though, of what were some of your concerns in regard to not wanting to go with open slot bars, and what are you hoping to gain by keeping it with the limited action slots?
Yeah, good question, man. I kind of, it's funny. I wish I could bring Sacred in here too at the moment, because he does a really good job of bringing like really good constructive feedback in a way that's not like that actually makes it easy to talk about it, even if he's railing on something. He does a really good job with that, and because of that, he and I specifically have been able to really dig down pretty deep into this topic, and he's been extremely helpful, even from the design side. So I want to give him some props. So the idea for me, and I've mentioned a couple of things to him in those conversations about, from EverQuest specifically, what are the kind of moments that really marked me in terms of finding myself in a situation, in a game where there's not leashing and there is a death penalty. So you're talking serious tension when things get rough, and I do not immediately have access to the ability that would totally like fix the problem. And it's skill wise, like, I've played WoW enough competitively, arena, rated BGs, all those things. I know what it feels like to know your character, your abilities, have your, like 30 hotkeys that you've instinctively know how to push and know when to push, and have all of the add-ons and things that are, making it where it is just, you do not miss a beat. I know what that feels like. And, but I also have this very deep, mark of what it felt like to be in a very tense game with limits to what I'm able to do in any given situation. So that's one of the reasons I like it. I like it because it makes you have to think in ways you wouldn't normally have to think. Not only preceding fights, but in the midst of them, because you have to think a little bit differently how to deal with certain situations, and that has a lot of good cross-pollination, I guess, on group play, because the way that you interact with and depend on other group members when you don't have the full, set of answers in your own hand, and you have to work in maybe some unconventional ways and work with people in unconventional ways. I think it's really interesting. And that being said, though, one of the things that, in some of those design meetings with Sacred that we worked through is, how can we like both make it to where we do have a limited action set, and we do really continue to through to that. But we don't also, one of his great points on this was, we don't want people living out of their bags. We don't want people living out of their, if it's a clicky, if it's a consumable, if it's like, you don't want to be running around with your bags open all the time just so you can use those things. So I don't mind going ahead and saying kind of the direction we're taking with it now. But we're still going to have limited action bar. You're going to have your 8 slots, your 8 main slots, which are going to be your action-based abilities, in the sense of these are abilities that are directly affecting an offensive target, or directly affecting a defensive target in the form of healing. So your damage dealing abilities, your CC abilities, again, directly affecting a target, an offensive target detrimentally, which would include things like CC and, interrupt and silence and things like that. That's going on your main bar, and that's all the only kind of abilities that can go there. The utility bar as a 6 slot is going to be for any of the other abilities that you want to have available to you during combat. And so you got the 8 slot, direct, healing type abilities, and direct damage, or direct, I think an easy word for it,
Control.
but abilities that directly affect a target, control, things like that. Yeah. And then you've got your utility abilities, that are the other abilities you want available to you in combat, and those can be whatever you want as well. They just can't be those types of the types of abilities that can only go on that main bar. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add two rows of 8 hotbars, 8 slots,
Beans.
2 rows of 8 slots that are on, I guess they'll be wherever you want them to be as far as where you want to drag it around. But those will be specifically your out of combat bars, where if you want to have clickies, if you want to have consumables, if you want to have long-term buffs that you don't want to be dragging onto your bar and dragging off every time you want to use them, and they're things you'd only really be using out of combat anyway, potions, just anything that you would want to have access to outside of that only usable in combat, only things you can use in combat bars, then that's where those things will live. And so when you initiate combat, those 2 bars on the side will gray out. You won't be able to access those. You'll only have what you have on your main bars. When you leave combat, then have those. And to say too, like, obviously if you don't have a target, an offensive target, then you're not going to be able to use like your offensive abilities on your main bar. But if there are anything on your utility bar or whatever, and you're outside of combat, you can use those as well. The in combat distinction is just meant to say when you enter combat, that those secondary 2 bars will lock out. They will be unavailable to you. You will only have what you have on those 8 and 6 bars, those 14 total slots. That's all you will have available to you while in combat. And then I want to stress this too. This is how we are going into testing. We said it before already in this interview, like design is things can sound great on paper. Things can sound great in theory and have all kinds of reason and purpose behind it. But until you get into it and test it, you don't know yet. And so please understand that like these kinds of decisions, we're very passionate about them. There's a lot of conviction behind them, but if they don't work, they don't work. And it's not a hill to die on. So this is how we're going into testing, and we're looking forward to seeing the feedback.
Well, because it's my show, I'm just going to say I love it. So I'm all for it. We're going to pull in Erikai. So Erikai, you are next. Have you come in and get your one question so we can try to get some more people. We got about a little over 15 minutes left. Erikai, welcome in. How are
Thanks,
you?
Hoye. Thanks for the question, by the way.
So what's going on, Erikai? What do you have for Joppa?
Oh, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan. Just about everything that I see that Joppa says, all of his design philosophies and his approach to what is going to make Pantheon, and what is going to build an interesting game with ideas and features that foster community and longevity. I just think that's really exciting. And I just wanted to say, I'm supportive. I just really like what you're doing, and I appreciate all the work that you do. I'm 100% behind you. You got my support all the way through launch. I'm
Thank you, man.
trying to be #Pantheon patient. And I am super excited for Summoner. I can't wait until we get some more details, see some gameplay. I mean, I will wait, but I'm super excited for it. And just the last thing, because I want to get this hashtag trending. Just hashtag
if we
Pantheon,
start something that
all.
actually trends, I mean, that's I'm sorry.
Okay, trending within the community.
Yeah,
How
go
about
ahead,
that?
go ahead.
I just want Pantheon, save us all.
There you go.
I want that to be a thing. So yeah, that's it. Just full support from here. Love you guys. Really appreciate what you're doing for the community and for MMOs at large. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks
Love you guys. See ya.
I'm sure Joppa is just as trying to be Pantheon patient as us. I'm sure Joppa that you would want nothing more than to have people come into that world, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, man. Oh, yeah. It's
All
hard
right.
to put into words.
Yeah. We're bringing Vanguard. You ready for him? He's a regular.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Let's do it.
Vanguard, welcome on. How are you, man? What's up, man? Oh,
It's
that's my favorite part of Vanguard, Joppa.
He was in mid chuckle.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
every time. If you watch this show, every time we pull Vanguard into this channel, he is always in mid laugh. You know something's good. Vanguard, go ahead, throw out your question. What's up?
Thank you. First off, Joppa, thank you very much for doing this with the community. It means a lot to everybody when you take time out of your schedule to do this. So I am only going to stick to asking one question, but it is in 27 parts. So the question is about the level of detail. So it's one thing to look at a static, unmoving model, be that a character, a tree, or a building, where you have an unlimited amount of time to study every single pixel. It's something completely different when you're in the game, you're in near constant motion, you're rarely zoomed in that far, and quite soon after you start playing, you're most likely covered head to toe in some form of clothing or armor, making all of those details pretty much hidden forever. Are the criticisms that have been made by some unfounded, that these models show an unnecessary expenditure of time, effort, and money chasing perfection? Thus, you could have had less detailed models and textures that would still capture the essence of everything you're looking for and still make this game visually impressive.
Thanks, Vanguard. I'm gonna drop you. Joppa.
Yeah, good question. I've seen the arguments, or I've seen the comments, I guess, a better way to put it, about this topic, especially since the last stream that we did. And this may seem like too light of an answer, but it is an honest answer, and it's probably something that, you know, we could have some of the other guys like Jimmy, you know, for example, to maybe speak to a little bit more. But the first thing I want to say is it's a character artist that creates these assets, and not the programmers, not the environment artists, not the writers, not the game designers. And so when you have a dedicated person like a character artist whose job is to create characters, then it shouldn't be looked at as, well, you could get the game out a lot more quickly if you would just, you know, kind of done less with the character models and just got something else done instead, because you have dedicated people working on those things. And then the second part of the answer is that it doesn't take an exponentially greater amount of time to achieve the level of detail that you're seeing in these models. In the modern era, with the advent of like Substance Designer and Substance Painter and things like that, like it's not, it looks like it would take a crazy amount of time and effort, and somebody, you know, getting carpal tunnel and like losing their vision to just be there, kind of like meticulously hand plucking these little spikes and dimples and scales. And in reality, it's very easy to do if you have a good person doing it, somebody that knows what they're doing, is very familiar with the tools. And so Pantheon is a massive game. We're always being cautious about where we expend resources and when we expend resources. And then to the greater, or the other, I guess, part of the question is, you know, does it ultimately matter? Like if everything's moving around and stuff, and it matters because the details really do matter. Those moments where you stop, and those moments where you've been playing your character for 30, 40 levels, and you just have that moment where you catch, you know, a glimpse of them, and you zoom in and you kind of take stock again of what you are and what you look like, and you appreciate the little details about your character. I mean, there are people who genuinely care about that. And is that a hill to die on? No. If we have to make a decision about, you know, adding an extra spike or you know, this, that, or the other, versus like getting something, you know, core and fundamental to the game finished, of course we're not going to put the game at rest to do that. But I want to just try and dispel as much as I can this idea that having good looking character models is in some way leeching or siphoning away from the ability to do everything else well and as quickly as possible.
I think another thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to speak for you at all, but one of my reactions to the comment of, oh, we're going to put armor on, right? You're also going to be in cities of these character models. They're going to have their own towns. They're going to have their own merchants. They're going to have their own beings. There's going to be a Scar world as well. And those people might be in rags. You may see more of their skin. You may see more of their details. Just because you're decked out in armor doesn't mean that the entire Scar existence is decked out in armor. You're going to see these models through the NPCs in the world around you. Is that pretty true?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you could even take that further and say, you know, imagine a storyline where, you know, you're, because of your skill as a keeper, your skill in the perception-based arts as a keeper, I mean, wouldn't keepers make great detectives because of their ability to perceive and find clues and, you know, follow trails based on insight? And so what if one of those is to lead you to, we'll use a tribe of Scar as an example, and you're looking for one that has a particular marking on its back. And so now all of a sudden your actual ability to get through this storyline is predicated on like high detail, zoomed in, close examination of these things' backs. And so again, that's, you could make that sound like way too dramatic of an example. Like, so therefore we have to spend all this, you know, I defer to my earlier comments about the time and energy and whatnot, but you know, there are plenty of moments where you will take into account the detail and the look of these things more deeply than you would on a normal day just running around slaughtering orcs.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to try to get to a few more people here. We may not get to the chat questions. I do want to get the green room out. We'll see what happens there, but let's go ahead and we'll bring in a guy that if it wasn't for, I wouldn't be here. So I think you might have heard of him. He actually answered a message from me, which he never had to do, and it pretty much started my run. So we're gonna bring Basgrim in, and Basgrim, I see you're unmuted, so I'm gonna bring you in for a question with Joppa. What's up, Baz? How are you?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. You only are allowed to
Hey,
ask about why elves have to exist. That's it. That's the only one you're allowed to. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I actually have a question about the Dark Mirror, and yes, it is mirror. I don't care what anybody says.
Thank you, Basgrim. I don't care about what the guy who made it says. Okay.
Also, in relation to the recent race model reveals, I noticed that in the previous concept art for the Dark Mirror, you had a version for when they were on land and a version for when they were in water, and it included them having a tail. And I noticed that that tail was not included in the new concept art. And in kind of tying in with that, it's my understanding of the lore of the Dark Mirror that all of the water outside of Cyrani's Rest is essentially poisonous to the Dark Mirror. So, but yet they also have a racial passive that allows them to breathe underwater anywhere. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about what the Dark Mirror's relationship is with underwater content?
Thanks, Baz.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I'll just say first of all that we have decided to go away from the underwater form, if you will, like having when you go underwater, like you lose your legs and you get a tail. That I think that's something I think we probably put that forward in the past a little prematurely, because to go back to Vandred's question, like that's an example of where we have had to say, is it worth the time? Is it worth, with all of the different animations that would have to be created for that, with the different art, with working out like how armor and things like that would work. It does create kind of a magnitude of work that we've decided to cut that aspect. And so instead we've given them, the increased swim speed passive, and there's some other cool things we can do down the road to kind of, nod at that aspect and try to, improve and deepen the flavor there. But as far as the second question goes, Cyrani's sacrifice not only gifted them with legs and the ability to kind of breathe, not only legs, but, lungs and the ability to breathe on land, but it also kind of acclimated them to the waters of Terminus. And so whatever she did, whatever she imbued them with by sacrificing herself, gave them what they needed to be able to survive in the waters and on the lands of Terminus.
Awesome. Good lore stuff there. Good lore stuff. There's a lot of lore fans out there, so they like that. That's good. Let's get, we got to get the master of beans in. I mean, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be talking about beans. Nathan, I hope you're ready. I see you're muted. Let's bring you in. No puppet questions. Unless you designed that minus puppet that we've been wondering about. Maybe we could talk about that. But Nathan, go ahead, unmute your mic in Discord so we can bring you in. And if I see, there you go. So here he comes. Mr. Nathan Napalm, how are you?
Hello.
I'm going to turn you down a little bit. Go ahead, buddy. What's up?
Hey, what's up, guys? Mr. Joppa, big fan. I love you. I'm holding your puppet right now.
Things you never thought you would hear going into game development, Joppa. That is at the top of the list.
That's true.
So I've got an interesting question for you. So I had another question, but I'm going to ask this one because it's my wife's birthday, and this is what she wants to know. So she's very excited to play the game too. We've actually decided that we're going to divorce just so we can remarry in game with a cleric logged in, maybe to marry us. So how possible is that going to be, do you think?
Getting married in game?
Yeah.
I mean, we would welcome it, man. I think I would call that very possible. I wouldn't recommend getting divorced.
Yeah, it's gonna be way too expensive to get divorced. Just renew your vows.
Okay. Or are we talking role play? Or are we talking systems in game to support that? Do you think?
Nathan.
No systems in game planned for that. So I would see that being something more kind of role played. But my hope would be that there would be some in-game items and some different things that players could travel around and get to, kind of make it more celebratory and more exciting. But at the same time, I don't want to say that there isn't anything that will be in place for something like that, because those are in the spectrum of all the things we need to consider and kind of work out, and I guess you would call on kind of the trajectory of now until launch and all the things left to do. That's something that will come later, thinking through some of those social aspects like that, how we want to handle those kinds of things. So I don't want to say there's never going to be anything for that. We just haven't solidified anything yet.
Awesome. Got a couple minutes left. Lox, if you're there, go ahead and unmute your mic. I'll bring Lox in. Lox is a streamer. He's going to actually be streaming Pantheon when it comes out. Also a fellow guild member. He's been on the show a few times. So does a lot of old school RPGs. So Lox, what's your question? What's up, man?
Yeah. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Joppa, this is something I asked you when I met you about 2 years ago in Boston at PAX East. So I'm actually just interested how or if the answer has changed over 2 years. So what kind of in-game guild mechanics can we expect?
Great question, Knox. Thank you.
In-game guild mechanics. Again, this is where I have to try to like self-edit a little bit and not go way in the weeds. So you will be able to form guilds. You will be able to manage your guilds ideally from within the game in a complete holistic sense, if you so choose, meaning that my desire would be to see a guild interface that would allow you to manage recruitment, manage things like special currency oversight, whether that be DKP or some form of like loot council type functionality, that you could have message board type functionality in there to a degree on certain upcoming events and this, that, and the other, besides just like guild message of the day, something a little bit more robust. There's that word. So
I like robust. That makes me very excited, Joppa, to hear robust guild mechanics. That's important.
Yeah. Now, what we talked about at PAX, I remember this conversation now, which is that we want to explore what I would call kind of an evolution of the guild war premise, where, if you remember back in EQ, you could slash guild war as a guild leader, and if the other guild leader typed slash guild war back, then you were now PvP enabled. Would love to see something like that, but actually have dedicated zones that would be a place that guilds could kind of go a little bit more all out in that sense, and the things that you could vie for, whether it's a keep that a guild could basically siege and take ownership of, and then guild wars were maybe for the purpose of trying to wrestle that keep away from a competing guild, and then once you do have ownership of that keep, then you can begin through even just like NPC activity, like the mining and the accumulation of certain resources and whatnot, and it could be a zone that other players even could come in and have access to certain things as long as Guild War wasn't going on. But that's one of the things I would love to see us be able to do. Whether that's something we'll be able to have by launch, it's probably not likely, but it's something that is like a very, very important
expansion. It's a great expansion.
Yeah, I think you could see an expansion theme around something like that for sure. And then the infamy system as well would be a place where we want to explore how to incentivize guilds and give guilds, paths to have, different bragging rights and different perks and, things that they can work towards and unlock through the raiding scene. And But I don't know if I mean, there's probably more I could say, but maybe that's a good little download.
Well, everybody, that's our time. I don't want to keep Joppa here all night. So he was awesome enough to give us an hour and a half, and we were originally going to do an hour. So Joppa, thank you so much for that. I think it allowed us to get a little more in depth on the questions that me and you were going through, and it still gave us about a half hour there to get to the community, which is awesome. So first, thank you very much for that.
Oh, my pleasure. This is awesome.
Have fun. It went by pretty quick, right? It wasn't too bad. Not too painful.
Yeah, it did. That was great.
And the big thing, we know Theric took a lot of questions from you guys. So what we're going to do is Theric has all those. He's actually been compiling those. So we're going to, we'll get to those questions as a community, and anything we already know the answer to, we'll shoot answers out, and maybe we'll throw an email together or send it off to, Kilson or something like that. And, maybe see if any of those can be answered on a stream when you guys have extra time or anything like that. We'll see what we can do. Maybe get those questions off to VR. So we'll definitely do that for you guys. I apologize we couldn't get to you, but I did want to prioritize the people in the green room to be able to come on, as that is the show. So Joppa, before we go, anything you want to say to the community? Anything you want to talk about real quick before we wrap it up?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, a huge thank you to you guys as well. I mean, I appreciate all the thanks and whatnot. But when you get into game development, especially when it's how I did, it's so exhilarating to feel like I get to play a role in creating a game. Like, what kind of game do I want to make? What are we doing? Like, it's this amazing thing that you're like, I want to make a game that I want to play. But then over time and even quickly, it in a very amazing way starts becoming about the people that you're actually making the game for. And you referenced it earlier, Minus, about, it's hard for us to be patient as well. And it's so true. I mean, there is not a better time on this team than when we do our pre-alpha sessions right now. When we have players in the game, playing the game, talking about the game, and we're able to see them moving around in the game and experiencing the game, like, there is absolutely nothing like that. I don't care what the best day of development is. It doesn't compare with having people playing the game. And so I hope that you all understand, like, we're not sitting on our hands. We're not, wasting time. We are doing everything that we physically possibly can to move this game forward, to not rush it, to not compromise. We understand the importance of what launching this game means. And we've seen, I mean, I referenced Vanguard earlier, that's ever present, in front of us, to know, like, there's a way to fail. There's a way to fail very, in a very devastating kind of way. And none of you want that. We don't want that. And so just know that we understand the patience that you're having to carry. We understand how hard it is to bear that sometimes. We understand even sometimes when it doesn't feel like we hear. I was just telling the guys earlier today, and this memory from Vanguard and beta, I was so upset about the unibody models in Vanguard. Like, I could not get past it. It drove me crazy. And I remember there were a couple of other things. And one day, Brad shouted something in the zone, and I just unloaded. I just, like, blew up the shout channel with all of my feedback. Like, you guys need to do this. You guys need to do this. You guys need to do this. Because, like, here's Brad McQuaid in the zone. He's listening. He's going to do something about it. And, of course, a lot of those things didn't happen. And it was very hard for me to reconcile that. And now, being here now, I can see things where, from the perspective of the community, it's like, guys, just do this. It's simple. It's easy. Just do this thing and be done. And as much as you're able to trust me, and when I say, like, it's not that we don't see it, it's not that we don't understand it, but it's not always as easy as it seems to do something a particular way or in a particular time frame. But it doesn't mean that it's not on the radar. So anyway, there's that, but more than anything, it's the huge thank you to all of you for the support, the patience. It means the world, and is a huge part of helping us keep going to the finish line. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys, everybody who supported. I do apologize we couldn't get to everybody, but this show does go on. We'll have it every week. And like I said, get your questions into us and we'll do our best to either answer it with things we know or to get them off and try to get some answers for you guys. That's what we do. So, Joppa, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast. I was so nervous starting it and it just felt natural and good. So I appreciate you working with me through that. Awesome time. Thank you very much. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, we can do it again and get some more of the community involved. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Absolutely. Onward and upward, everyone. Thanks so much.
Take care, guys.